Did you know that the most affordable electric vehicle in the US has been discontinued? And that some of the cheapest EVs in the world come from China, but you can't buy them here? Chinese EVs are taking the world by storm, but they are banned from the US market. What does this mean for American consumers? And what does all this have to do with national security? This is the real reason the US doesn't want Chinese EVs. EVs are supposed to be the future of transportation, but they're actually really expensive. Did you know the most affordable EVs in the US have been discontinued? And the next option, like the Tesla Model 3, starts at nearly $40,000. Why are EVs so pricey in the US, even with tax credits and carbon reduction programs? The reality is, despite all the efforts to promote EV adoption, we're still falling behind. But what if we told you that just south of the border, in places like Mexico and Costa Rica, there are tons of affordable EV options? Down there, you'll find brands like Zaka, Zev, Jack, Carry, KE, Maxus, and Jill, offering vehicles for under $20,000. Why haven't you heard of these brands? That's because they're practically banned from the US market. So how did we get here? Let's rewind to the 1950s. Post-war America was booming and the automotive market was dominated by the big three: GM, Ford, and Chrysler. These companies were the pillars of the American car industry, but then new competitors started to appear. Can you imagine how Americans felt about buying cars from their former enemies just after World War II? The sentiment was so strong that Nissan had to change its name to be accepted in the US. Even with this resistance, Japanese cars eventually became popular because they were reliable, affordable, and fuel-efficient. European cars also made their way into the market, but they weren't the typical family cars Americans were used to. This historical backdrop helps us understand why the US is so protective of its car market today. Then in 1973, and everything changed when the oil crisis hit. Arab oil-exporting countries banned exports to nations supporting Israel, causing oil prices to skyrocket in the US. Suddenly, American consumers had to rethink their car choices, and fuel-efficient Japanese cars became very appealing. But how did American car manufacturers react? They weren't happy at all. Under pressure from lobbyists and unions, the US government started to push back against the flood of Japanese cars. By the 1980s, Reagan's administration stepped in. They negotiated export restraints and convinced Japanese companies to build manufacturing plants in the US. Did this solve the problem? Well, it created jobs and brought in some tax revenue, but over time, many of these jobs were replaced by automation. This tough competition period forced American manufacturers to innovate. By the mid-2000s, Asian automakers made up about 40% of US car sales. Meanwhile, the US government was busy bailing out Detroit's auto industry, leaving a lasting mark on the economy. American brands, especially Tesla, have since worked hard to regain market share in the EV segment. But why is making these vehicles affordable still such a struggle? Let's switch to China. The story there is quite different. Take BYD, for example. Starting as a battery company in 1995, BYD shifted to car manufacturing in 2003 and launched its first EV, the F3, in 2005. Making their own batteries gave them a huge advantage in cutting costs and staying competitive. Did you know that in 2023, Tesla made an average of $8,200 per car with an 18% gross margin? While BYD made about $1,700 per car with a 26% gross margin. How do they keep costs so low? One key factor is vertical integration. BYD controls its entire supply chain, from battery production to vehicle assembly. This reduces production costs and improves efficiency. So while American brands are struggling with high production costs, Chinese companies like BYD are thriving. What do you think? Should the US open its market to Chinese EVs, or should it continue to protect its domestic industry? Let us know in the comments below. Cheaper labor and government subsidies are also big factors. Did you know that Chinese government provides massive support to their EV industry through subsidies, tax breaks, and cheap loans? This has helped Chinese companies like BYD offer affordable EVs without losing profitability. For example, the BYD Yuan Plus, a crossover SUV, sells in China for about $16,000. Compare that to the Tesla Model Y, which costs around $39,000 to produce. Why are Chinese EVs so much cheaper? China's dominance in the EV market also comes from controlling the battery supply chain. Chinese companies own stakes in mines around the world, giving them control over a large part of the world's supply of key battery materials like nickel, cobalt, and manganese. They also refine these materials and manufacture EV battery components, giving them a significant advantage. Batteries make up about 40% of the production cost of an EV, which is a huge deal. Ford, for example, has struggled to make EVs affordable. In 2024, Ford had to cut back production of its F-150 Lightning because sales dropped. The electric version of their popular pickup truck cost more than its gas-powered counterpart. Did you know Ford even looked into building a new battery plant in the US using technology from CATL, a Chinese company? But political concerns and connections to the Chinese government killed the proposal in Virginia, forcing Ford to look elsewhere. The trade war between the US and China adds another layer of complexity to the EV market. Did you know that under President Trump, the US imposed a 25% tariff on Chinese-made cars? The Biden administration has extended these tariffs and even proposed increasing them to 100%. What's the reason behind these tariffs? They're designed to protect American jobs and industries, but they also keep affordable Chinese EVs out of the US market. President Biden's administration is walking a tightrope between climate goals and protecting American jobs. On one hand, their climate strategy includes strict new regulations on auto emissions and subsidies to help consumers buy EVs. But why are they also blocking Chinese EVs? They want to prevent China from gaining a monopoly in the EV market. Plus, Chinese factories generally produce more greenhouse gas emissions than American plants, raising environmental concerns. Allowing cheap Chinese EVs into the US market could drive down prices and boost EV adoption, helping the environment. But what's the downside? It could undermine American manufacturers and lead to job losses in a critical sector of the economy. It's a tough balance to strike, especially with the broader geopolitical context in mind. In other parts of the world, Chinese EVs are really taking off. Did you know the BYD Seagull costs just $10,000 in China and is already making waves in Europe? Meanwhile, the US is pouring money into building its own EV industry. Bloomberg estimates it will cost $82 billion for the US to meet domestic demand for EVs by 2030. But here's the catch. This investment will take time to show results. So what does this mean for American consumers right now? They're left with fewer affordable options for EVs. Should the US focus more on innovation and competitiveness rather than protectionism? Some people think so. Look at Japan, for example. Instead of imposing trade restrictions, major Japanese auto companies like Nissan and Honda are developing new EV models to stay competitive. In Latin America, the situation is different. Countries like Mexico and Costa Rica are benefiting from a wider selection of affordable EVs from China. Why is this the case? These countries are primarily consumers, not major producers, so they gain from having more options and better prices. If you're enjoying this video so far, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more insights on the latest trends in technology and the automotive industry. The debate over tariffs and trade policies is anything but simple. Why is it so complicated? On one hand, protecting domestic industries is key for economic stability and keeping jobs safe. But on the other hand, fostering innovation and competition can lead to better products and more choices for consumers. So what's the US government trying to do? They're trying to strike a balance between these competing priorities. Let's dig into the strategies behind the US government's approach. The Biden administration is focused on supporting American jobs and industries. How are they doing this? President Biden has made Chinese EVs prohibitively expensive by signing an executive action that quadruples tariffs on these imports to 100%. But why such a huge tariff? This move aims to protect American automakers by putting potential Chinese imports at a significant cost disadvantage compared to American-made EVs. But some models, like the budget-friendly BYD Seagull, could still be cheaper than some American rivals even after the tariffs. Environmentalists and liberal economists argue that importing low-cost, low-emission technologies could help fight climate change. But what's the administration's take? Biden's aides believe that restricting Chinese EVs is crucial to counter illegal and harmful trade practices by Beijing. They insist that this trade approach will ultimately benefit American jobs and national security, along with the planet. A big reason for stopping China from getting a monopoly on EVs is to make sure electric cars and trucks stay affordable. Remember how the COVID-19 pandemic showed us how fragile global supply chains are? Products like semiconductors became hard to get from China and other Asian countries, causing prices for consumer electronics and other goods to skyrocket, which fueled inflation. So why is the Biden administration preventing China from dominating the EV market? They want to avoid a similar scenario where supply issues lead to skyrocketing prices for electric vehicles. National security is another critical concern. Did you know the administration is investigating the risks of software and hardware in future imported smart cars from China? Why are they doing this? They're worried these cars could track Americans' locations and send that data back to Beijing. Liberal economists also fear that China could cut off access to new cars or key components for strategic reasons. Allowing China to dominate EV production could lead to similar economic and security challenges we've seen with gasoline-powered cars, where one country controls the supply and prices of a crucial commodity. Political factors also play a huge role. Did you know President Biden is promising that his climate program will create good-paying, blue-collar manufacturing jobs, especially in key swing states like Pennsylvania and Michigan? Why is this important? Biden, a strong supporter of organized labor, is counting on union votes to help win those states. He's pledged that the energy transition will benefit union workers. And he's betting that their support for tariffs designed to protect American manufacturing jobs will outweigh any complaints from environmentalists who want faster progress on reducing emissions. Japan is tackling global competition in a unique way. Instead of putting up trade barriers, major Japanese auto companies like Nissan and Honda are focusing on innovation. They're developing new EV models to stay competitive and meet the growing demand for environmentally friendly vehicles. Why is this important? It shows the different strategies countries and companies use to handle the complexities of the global auto market. And if you learned a lot from this, make sure to click on our next video to find out more about why EV sales are plunging, the real reason revealed, electric vehicles and market performance.